So, The Dark Knight, it's an incredible movie, and I want to just start this series talking about interpretation of things. Now I want to interpret sort of camera work, among other things, and today we're going to be interpreting the interrogation scene from The Dark Knight. You know, it's the one where Batman beats Joker to a pulp in order to get the information out of him about where Harvey Dent is. And eventually Joker gives it to him, even though he was always going to give it to him, but he was just sort of toying with him because he's a massive pain in Batman's butt. Now today I just want to analyse not specifically the scene or the dialogue from Heath Ledger's Joker or Christian Bale's Batman, where they're sort of talking about sort of society and stuff like that, and Joker giving his view of that stuff. Now, first of all, looking at the script, we can see that the interrogation room is its own scene, and the observation room is its own scene also, which, they're different locations. Now, before I get into the analysis of the very, very specifically awesome camera work here, I just want to talk about the 180-degree rule, which is basically a rule in filmmaking. If you're familiar with filmmaking, you'll know it, that basically keeps things on the left and right side of the frame in a sort of conversation scene. It's for continuity purposes, but sometimes that rule is broken in the realm of filmmaking. There is such an example of it here in this scene with Batman and the Joker. So the camera movement kind of matches their dialogue. We're going back and forth behind the two of them as they're talking, sitting down. And this is just a very specific part where they're sitting down, talking about the sort of nature of society. And this is just a very specific part where they're just sitting down, talking about the nature of society before Batman grabs him and starts to beat the pigeon poo off his face. Now, I really think this is some of the most simply beautiful camera work I've ever seen, which is why I want to start this series talking about this very specific camera work. Having studied film for about 4 years now, and having sort of looked into the sort of nature between these two things, these two characters are quite clearly, as say Jordan Peterson would put it, the archetypes of good and evil. Joker is the archetypal bad character. He's he's blowing up hospitals and robbing banks and killing people like a maniac. And Batman is the archetypal superhero. We all love superhero and supervillain, but that's what makes Chris Nolan's Batman Dark Knight so great. It's sort of grounded in reality in such a way that makes it one of the best movies of all time, according to IMDb. So the camera is simply moving back and forth behind them. And I believe this is a very, very brilliant wide-scale and micro-scale choice by Christopher Nolan. They're going back and forth talking in the scene, but I also think it's a brilliant representation of good and evil, darker, lighter. We're constantly sliding between the left and the right. Think of the karma meter in Fallout 3. We're constantly going slightly towards the left when you nick someone's gum, or you're going right when you give the malnourished man outside of Megaton some water. And I think the darker, lighter thing, I think it's a really good representation of sliding good and evil, good and evil. I think we all have days where we're feeling slightly worse about life. We are looking at it in a more nihilistic lens, and then we have days where we're looking at it in a more positive lens, where we are sort of maybe a bit more jovial about our prospects. I also think it could be applied to things like depression. Sometimes you're sliding deeper and deeper into a depression, but when you're sliding towards the good, you are feeling better. You're sliding towards better, but when you're feeling more and more depressed, your view of the world is getting more and more negative. Not in the way that you're performing evil acts like the Joker, but it's kind of a similar thing. Good, evil, it determines your view. If you're depressed, you're kind of seeing things in a much more negative light. It's also a representation of extreme actions you hear about in the news. You see a school shooting and you just think, my God, that's terrible. The person who performed that must be very close, about as close as you can get to the Joker in terms of the left of the scale, if it is a left of the scale, if it is that far on the slide. But then it's going back and forth, because after that they go to prison and then they're rehabilitated. But they're not getting out because they are a school shooter, but they are probably regretting the hell out of their actions, and we're just all glad they're behind bars because of what they did. Some things you just can't come back from, as happens with Heath Ledger's Joker in the film. Then there's things that slide more towards the good side of the thing. But I also think we're all constantly going in flux back and forth. I never think you're going to be in a permanent state of eternal happiness or a permanent state of eternal misery. I think we're in a constant flux, and the camera work here in this scene is a great representation of that. Good, evil, light, dark, different moods, different perspectives. That is what I think the camera work in this scene is showing. And I think overall we're always probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think anyone watching this video is going to be performing acts of the Joker. If you want to try and be Batman, feel free to try and be Batman. I mean, you need to be super rich first, but then you can do it. And I mean, you can always try and do a thing Batman would do in real life, and maybe even a thing Joker would do too, like tell a unsavory joke. Not too unsavory there, but that is my interpretation of this back and forth camera here. I think it is absolutely brilliant by Christopher Nolan. I think it's just perfect complement to the scene itself with Batman and the Joker. Thank you for watching. I think there's a lot to be learned from this very simple piece of camera work about how to convey things yourself, sort of in the way of thinking about it. And have a good one.